Welcome back. Chapter 9. Virgil had gotten two names from Catherine Green, the cultural science professor. They were Cleet May, the man who might have macho problems but was useful for carrying heavy stuff, and Terry Foster, an Army veteran who apparently fought in Iraq or Syria. May lived in Dinkytown, which was closest, so Virgil went there first. He always preferred not to call ahead when he could avoid it, but to surprise the subject. May's address turned out to be an old blue two-story clapboard house cut up into 4 apartments, much like the house Megan Quill lived in. May lived in apartment A at the front of the house on the first floor. When Virgil rang the bell, he heard footsteps, and then a barefoot young woman with dark brown hair and dark brown eyes, carrying a bagel with cream cheese, opened the door and asked, "Yes, who are you?" Virgil identified himself, showed his ID, and asked for May. The woman said, "He's around the side of the house shooting his bow." "He won't shoot me, will he?" "Not on purpose, but he's not very good with it yet, so I can't make any promises. You know, like ricochets." She smiled and pointed him around to the side of the house, and he walked back outside and around and found May lying on his back on the concrete driveway, shooting extraordinarily long wooden arrows from an extraordinary long wooden bow at a straw target the size of a dinner plate, backed with a sheet of plywood. As Virgil watched, May released an arrow which missed the target but hit the plywood sheet and bounced off. 2 other arrows were already sticking out of the target, and 2 more lay in front of the backing. When the arrow bounced, Virgil asked, "What happens if you miss the plywood?" May craned his neck around, took in Virgil, and said, "I don't do that anymore. When I did do it, they skid down the driveway until they stopped. It's not a heavy bow. They don't go far. Fucks up the arrow feathers, though." Virgil identified himself again, and May stood up. He was an inch taller than Virgil, a bit overweight, but with solid biceps and triceps, and he appeared to be in his mid-20s. He had black hair that fell over his brown eyes, a scruffy beard, and a fleshy nose. He said, "I already talked to the lady detective. Who sized you on me? Who sicked you on me?" "She did. She thought maybe you figured something out since she talked to you. And she told me about you being arrested for hitting a guy with a chair." "I pled not guilty. The other guy was a serious asswipe," May said. "The county attorney is already talking to my dad. My dad's a lawyer about me taking a plea on a lesser charge, but we declined. I didn't hit the guy with the chair. I defended myself with it. The video proves it. I was keeping him off me." Virgil bobbed his head but said, "That's not quite the reputation you have around cultural science. They say you can be a little over-aggressive, into martial arts and so on." "Well, that's true," May said, "but I didn't kill Quill. I wasn't even pissed off at him. I sort of like cultural science because you don't have to work too hard at it. And if you got the cash, you can make interesting trips to places you don't usually see. I've been to Egypt, Madagascar, Japan, made a couple of trips to India. I'll get my PhD and go teach someplace that's got ski mountains and no restrictions on screwing your students. Utah, Colorado, Vermont, like that." "Did you know Quill?" "Not really. I mean, he showed up at Catherine's lecture with a bunch of his apostles and started screaming at her," May said. "Called her a twat. If you didn't take it too seriously, it was pretty funny." "Until you hit the guy with the chair," Virgil said. "Like I said, the ass wipe came for me," May said. "I didn't hurt him or anything. He had a bruise on his arm, a little fucking snowflake." "But then you invaded their territory." "Yeah. Catherine asked me to go along. She likes to stir up shit, but she also likes to have me between her and the shit she stirred up." "You're a bodyguard?" "Sorta. I mean, we went to India and she was talking women's right to these unemployed guys who look like they carved out your kidney for $2 and a bottle of beer, May said, stirring up some serious shit. If she always stirring up stuff, why do you go along with it? Makes the PhD easier. I'm good with Spanish, but my French sort of sucks, May said. Japanese? Forget about it. The other thing is, after I get my degree, I'd like to turn her upside down, if you know what I mean. Have you seen her? Yes, but, he looked back at the house, aren't you married or something? No, not me. That's a friend in there, May said. I'm not even romantic with her. Not yet, anyway. She comes over to watch my TV and wash her clothes. I have a washer and dryer in there. They're kind of a chick magnet, better than a dog. Then you've got a few bucks. Nice apartment, washer, dryer. My old man has a few bucks. He's a good guy. With me, he's hoping for the best, get a credential, get a job, willing to pay for school. May was beginning to seem unlikely as a suspect. Virgil couldn't even think of a reason why Quill would be in a corral with him. And if he was, why Quill would turn his back on him. And May seemed to be considerably less than the cultural science warrior Virgil had imagined, more interested in getting into Professor Shorts than actual becoming a cultural scientist, which Virgil could understand. He asked May about the bow. Japanese, May said. I like it because it's hard and weird. I read a Zen archery book when I was going to school. Zen and the Art of Archery, Eugene Hergel. You must have been a hippie. All the hippies read that. It's mostly bullshit, May said. This Japanese guy told me that Hergel didn't know enough Japanese to understand what his teacher was talking about, and his teacher wasn't a Zen guy anyway. In fact, he was sort of a crank. This archery I'm doing isn't Kyoto. That's what Hergel was writing about. Mine is the Japanese combat form of Kyujutsu. You're teaching yourself to kill people? May snorted. If I was going to kill somebody, I'd use a fucking gun. If I had a gun. Okay. I told you study Zen. I'm told you study Zen. I do. That's another thing women kind of like, Seems all mystical and so on, like you're spiritual. What I picked up in Japan was Zen is about as mystical as dirt, but it's still cool. Girls only want boyfriends who have great skills, Virgil said, quoting Napoleon Dynamite. That movie was about my life. Guys with skills, May said. I got skills, but no girls. Not right now, anyway. How about ever? Virgil asked. May scratched his neck. Oh, yeah. They come, but then they go. Know what I mean? One day they're sitting on your couch. The next day the couch is empty. He made Virgil laugh. Virgil asked May if he might have any idea of who had killed Quill. He didn't, and he didn't think it would be anyone in cultural science. The people in the department would talk about it for 8 years before they could do anything like that. They're not people who act on impulse. If they saw somebody coming after them with an axe, they try to get the guy to discuss it rationally instead of running away. He didn't have a suspect, but he did have a thought. It was a big deal when Quill got killed, even around cultural science, May said. We wondered if the cops would come after us. A couple days later, Sergeant Train showed up. After she talked to me, I got to thinking, why did Quill have a corral at the Wilson Library on the West Bank? And why did he keep a huge, heavy computer there? I'm listening, Virgil said. Why did he? May said, I don't know, but it might help if you figured it out. Listen, he's a medical guy. We have a medical library here on the East Bank. As far as I know, there are no medical books in the Wilson Library. He supposedly did some engineering work too in robotics, and the engineering library is over here. The university hospitals are here on the East Bank, and he probably had an office there. I'm sure he had a private office at his lab. All those guys do. Understand his house is on the East Bank. He has all kinds of private places and study possibilities over here. Why did he go over there? You ever walk across the Mississippi footbridge in the winter? You can freeze your nuts off. Why did he have a little tiny corral? I don't know, but I'll think about it. Here's what I'm thinking. He went there because it was quiet and he was away from everybody else. Like, where you want to think. This little Zen space is not your house. It's not your lab. You don't need to talk to anybody. You've got no TV to interrupt you. You want a clear, calm mind to digest it all. Then somebody, I'm thinking Russian or Chinese, could be a big American corporation. Virgil, Russians or Chinese? Sure, you must have read about it. They've got all these guys out there stealing American technology. And what's more high-tech than medicine? Especially the kind that Quill was doing. Quill's over there generating ideas and tech, and somebody finds out about it. Russians or Chinese, computer experts. They start going over there to monitor that computer. Maybe they have the computer securely spooled up all of Quill's input. Now he finds out that somebody is messing with his computer and knows they do it late at night because they need to do it when nobody's there. He thinks it's somebody from his lab or a student, and he goes over to surprise the guy, and he gets the surprise instead. That does sort of hold together, Virgil admitted. Yeah, it does, May said. It has the massive disadvantage of being too complicated. It fucks over Occam and his razor. It's possible that Quill was doing something online that he didn't want to risk any chance of being traced to him. Watching porn, yanking the crank, maybe buying dope on the dark net. Here's a big question. Was the guy who killed him in on whatever he was doing? They spent a couple of minutes speculating, came up with nothing solid. Virgil thanked him, gave him a card, walked back to his car, and then called Train to tell her about May's thoughts. Not about the Russian and Chinese or Quill yanking his crank, but the question of why he'd even have an office at the Wilson Library. A good question, she conceded. I wondered about that too, but he was such a hot shot that I figured he could get an office anywhere he wanted to. So he got one there, maybe on a whim. Maybe his work took him across the river sometimes and he wanted a private place to rest his feet. I don't know. Well, how did May know about the Chinese and Russian conversation? That kind of links something together. Virgil rang off and went to find Terry Foster, the military veteran. Foster lived across the city line in St. Paul. As he drove, he thought about what both May and Train had said and decided that Train's assumption was weak. If it was simply the casual exercise of academic power by Quill to get an extra office, what about the fact he probably had a library key? That would have taken more than clout. He'd have to have an illegal source for it. He'd probably have to evade janitors and other night workers if he didn't want to be seen. There was more to the corral than meet the eye. But Russians and Chinese? Unlikely. Terry Foster lived in a tiny stucco rental house in the area of St. Paul called Frogtown. A couple of aging birch trees shaded the neatly kept front yard, where a sidewalk of cracked concrete blocks led to an enclosed front porch. Virgil parked, knocked on the front door. There was no reaction from inside, but as he was standing there, a man came out on the porch of the house next door and said, "There's nobody home. Do you know when Mr. Foster will be back?" The man said, "No, he's in the hospital." So Terry Foster is the one that got attacked by the bat. Okay, y'all keep that in mind. Virgil walked over, a matter of 20 feet, identified himself and asked, "He's sick?" He got mugged right in our own alley, the man said. Somebody beat the sweet-leaving bejesus out of him the night before last. According to the neighbor, Foster home had a single-car garage in the back, which wasn't part of his rental deal. He had instead a parking space in the yard next to the garage. When he got out of his car, some guy was waiting for him, jumped out from behind the garage and beat him up. Terry was yelling for help, and the neighbor in back, Joe Lee, heard him and ran out and started yelling at the guy who ran off. Joe run out there and found Terry and called the cops. I didn't hear him yelling, but I heard the ambulance, and I run out there and saw them put him in the ambulance. He was a mess. He looked like he'd been blown up. How do you know that part about the guy jumping out from behind the garage? It was in the Pioneer Press. I guess they got it from the cops, the man said. Foster had been taken to Regents Hospital, the neighbor said. When Virgil asked, he said that Foster lived alone as far as he knew. He did drink a little. There's a street guy who goes around and takes aluminum cans out of the garbage, and he told me once that Terry was good for 30 or 40 cans. I guess he was drinking a 6-pack a day. When the neighbor ran out of information, Virgil walked around behind the house to look at the garage. The thing had probably been designed and built before World War II and would be a tight fit for any modern car. There was an overhead door facing the alley and a door on the end closet of the house for access, with a gravel parking spot to one side. Two tall aging arborvitae, stood on either side of the access door, a good spot to hide if you were planning to ambush whoever parked on the gravel spot. But no self-respecting mugger would have done that. If you got behind or between the arborvitae, you wouldn't be seen from anywhere but the back windows of the house. But if anyone saw you sneaking there, there'll be no excuse either. And if they call the cops, you'll never see them coming. As Virgil was walking around the garage, a man came out on the back porch of the house across the alley and called, "Who are you?" Virgil called back, "State Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. Are you Joe Lee?" "That's me." Lee came down from his porch and across the alley. "Have you found out anything?" Virgil shook his head. "I haven't started looking yet. It's a St. Paul's case. I'm looking to see if it ties into something else I'm investigating." "Really?" Lee was a brawny, sunburned man who might have been a heavy equipment operator, probably in his late 50s or early 60s. "I figured there had to be something else going on. The guy had him on the ground, never did try for his billfold. He just kept pounding him. Terry. You ever see anyone who looked like they were scouting the alley? Somebody who shouldn't have been here?" "No, nobody but Terry's girlfriend. I saw her a couple of times in the morning. I guess she stayed over." Virgil thought. Catherine Green. He asked, "What the girlfriend look like?" "Like, I don't know, a woodpecker?" "A woodpecker? Tall, thin, red hair. She wore up in a thing, a peak, on top of her head, like a Pilates woodpecker." "Good description," Virgil said. "It couldn't be Green." "The attack? You don't have any idea what that might have been about?" "Nope. I talked to Terry once in a while when we were taking out the garbage at the same time. Seemed like a nice guy. I didn't really know him, though." Lee had nothing more to say, and Virgil walked back around the house. The next-door neighbor was still standing there, keeping an eye out for Virgil. He asked, "Do I have to worry about it?" Virgil said, "I don't think so. Looks to me like whoever did it was targeting Mr. Foster." Virgil gave the neighbor a card and drove 5 minutes over to Regents Hospital, where he spent a few hundred hours as a St. Paul cop, both as an investigator and as a patient. When he asked at the emergency room desk, he was told that Foster had been moved to a regular room. He was conscious and expected to recover. Virgil got the room number, and as he went up in the elevator, it occurred to him to wonder why neither Catherine Green nor Clete May had mentioned the attack on Foster. Good point. The easy answer was they didn't know about it, but he'd ask. Okay, we shall see. Foster was a mess. He might have been a good-looking guy, perhaps an inch under 6 feet tall and in good shape, but now he had bandages wrapped around his head, completely covering one eye and one ear, and what Virgil could see of his face as he lay propped up in the hospital bed was heavily bruised, abraded. He also had a plastic brace covering his nose. Both of his arms, which were in casts that left nothing exposed except his fingertips, were teetered to an overhead rack and suspended. The one eye that was visible turned towards Virgil, and Foster croaked, "Who are you?" Virgil told him and then said, "I was looking for you over at your house. I wanted to talk to you about Quill's murder. Now I'm wondering if what happened to you had anything to do with that." "Don't know," Foster croaked. "Could you hold that water bottle so I can get a drink?" There was a plastic cup on the bed tray with a bent plastic straw sticking out of it, and Virgil held it while Foster drank. When he'd had enough, his tongue flicked out to wet his lips, and he said, "Thanks. At least that asshole didn't bust my teeth. I don't know why this happened. I did 3 tours in Iraq and Syria. I even got wounded, but I wasn't hurt this bad." All he knew about his attacker was that he was a white man. He'd seen his forearms and that he was about an average height and a little heavy. The police are calling it a mugging, but I'll tell you what, he was trying to kill me. That's how my arms got broken. I kept putting them up so he couldn't hit me in the head. He had a club, like a nightstick or something, like a police baton. He never tried to get my wallet, but that was maybe because I was screaming my head off, and then Jolie was yelling at him and he took off. They talked about it for a while, and Foster was insistent that there was no major drama in his life. He didn't have a full-time girlfriend, he said, but he wasn't gay either, nor was he Jewish or Islamic, and the attack was white on white, so it wasn't a random hate crime. He'd gone to the Green lecture where the fight started, but said he tried to break it up and hadn't hit anyone. It's all on that video they got. You can see for yourself. "You say you don't have a girlfriend. When I was over at your house, a neighbor mentioned a girl. Had you recently broken up with someone?" Foster said, "No, I don't." "Oh, somebody must have seen Sandy. She's not a girlfriend. She's just a friend from the U. She stayed over a couple of times, but we're not dating. We're both upfront about that." Women are sometimes less upfront than men are. I mean, you think everything is upfront, but... Foster waved him off. No. She drinks a little too much. I drink a little too much. And sometimes when we're both drunk a little too much, we're both feeling a little horny. She'll stay over. When we're both sober, then we're not attached. There's not another boyfriend who'd be unhappy about those sleepovers. No, she says not, and she's telling the truth. And he asked, "Why are you talking to me anyway? Did somebody say something?" Virgil said, "Because you're a military vet, which means that you're familiar with violence. You might even have done some." "Well, Jesus, man, I was in the Army," Foster said. "So was I," Virgil said. "I was an MP captain, and I did some violence myself, and I have as a cop. I don't think your history is a big deal, but when you're trying to figure out who might have done some violence, you got to ask around about who might be capable of it." Foster thought about that for a moment, then said, "Yeah, I guess." The nurse stuck her head in, glanced at Virgil, then asked Foster, "Do you need the bathroom?" "Not now," he said. "Ask me in an hour. My arms are starting to ache again." "I'll talk to you in an hour." When she was gone, Foster said, "They don't like to give me painkillers because they think I'll become a raging junkie. They can't see the pain, so they ignore it." He had not killed Quill, he said, had never seen Quill at the library, and hadn't known what he looked like until the confrontation at Green's lecture. He was a cultural science major, he said, because when he got out of the Army and started at the university, he hadn't yet figured out exactly what he wanted to do. I took a whole bunch of classes, a bunch of hours scattered over a bunch of subjects, and what I found out was that a lot of them were acceptable in cultural science. I signed up for cultural science because I could use credits I've already piled up towards a degree. To tell the truth, a lot of cultural science is like a magic show. I don't understand how anybody could believe the shit some of those professors tell you. Even Professor Green's, she's sort of out there, but she got some nice, well, hell. Virgil nodded. I noticed that. You got something going there? Foster gave his head a half shake. You know she's only like 34, same age as I am. I screwed around for a couple years after school, and then I went down to the recruiting office and signed up. I was in for 8. Think I might go lifer, but after that last tour in Syria, I bailed. Hit hard? Not so bad. Got shot in the thigh. Didn't do a lot of damage through and through, but made me think I might want to do something safer, especially since they keep sending me back and back and back. Foster said, I'm still in the reserve. If the college thing doesn't work out, the Army will let me back in at the same rank and with credits for time served. What I'm saying is I wound up in cultural science and Catherine's got the hot bod and she's my age and not hooked up with anybody. I went to India with her last year and there were a couple of times when I got the feeling that she liked my looks. You know, Dr. Foster female cure. Nothing happened? I'm sort of retarded that way, Foster said. He tried to smile but winced and said, I got a girl knocked up in high school and she had an abortion and everybody was yelling at me. I've been pretty worried about commitments ever since. But I had the feeling a couple of times in India that if I reached out and patted her on the ass, she wouldn't have complained. I've got that feeling right now, though this whole mugging thing didn't do much for my looks. Goddamn near ripped off one of my ears. When I get out of here, I might have to talk with her about things. I'm 34, time is wasting. I talked to Dr. Green yesterday. She didn't mention anything about you being attacked. Foster tried to shrug, mostly fell, winced again. I didn't tell anybody except my folks, and they live up in Black Duck. Nobody to tell her about it. Foster said he had no idea who might have killed Quill. There was a lot of hostility between him and the people of cultural science, and there are some goofy people in the department, but I can't say that any of them seem like killers. I talked to Cleet May. He thinks Dr. Green is pretty attractive. You don't think he'd consider you a rival? Foster tried to shake his head and mostly failed again. Wasn't Cleet. We do that bumping chest thing when we finish bad jobs for Dr. Green, like setting up 100 big old Army surplus tents, or at the lunch table when we were in India. Shit like that. Anyway, he's a lot bigger than me. The guy who jumped me was my size or shorter, stocky, maybe fat, but hard to tell in that situation. They talked for a while and Virgil thought he recognized the type. Some guys joined the military for the adventure and the idea that they might turn out to be Rambo. Others joined because they didn't know what else to do. They weren't qualified for any particular civilian job and thought they might try the Army. Foster seemed to fall in the second group, not particularly aggressive, not angry with the world, just a guy struggling with what to do with his life that might have some significance. He didn't see anything in Foster that suggested a murderer. He simply wasn't angry enough. Back outside, he called Train. There's an ex-Army guy named Terry Foster, one of the students of cultural science. I saw the name, didn't interview him. We need to look at him? I already did. Somebody tried to beat him to death a couple of days ago over in St. Paul. He's hurt bad and he's still at Regions. I don't think he had anything to do with Quill's murder, but it's a curious coincidence. When you say tried to beat him to death, attacked him with a club of some kind, broke both his arms when he tried to cover his head, broke his nose. He got some scalp trauma. He said if a neighbor hadn't seen what was happening and started yelling at the attacker, he would have been killed. That worries me, Train said. I'll get with St. Paul and see what they have to say. Push them. Good idea. Right now, I'm told they're treating it as a mugging. Let me ask you something else. Did you do a background on Catherine Green? Check out her love life? No. Should I have? Foster said that Green might have eyes for him. He felt some interest. I'm wondering if the attack on Foster might be a red herring, that it doesn't have anything to do with the Quill murder, but is somebody who's interested in Green who might be taking out the competition. After talking to Foster, I got the feeling he was targeted, that the attack wasn't random, that it was an ambush. Well, poop, Train said. I guess I'll work tomorrow. Are you on your way home? I'm meeting my girlfriend and one of her kids over at Davenport's place and then going home after that. When I found out what happened, I came over here to Regents. Now I'm thinking I should find out where Green is and talk to her about it. She's over in St. Paul's too. I went to her house. Let me get you the address. Virgil considered calling Green to make sure she was around, but after getting her address from Train on Mount Carver Boulevard, he realized she must live within a few blocks of Davenport. The interview probably wasn't critical, as if she wasn't home, he'd try again on Monday. She was home. Green lived in a white clapboard house set high on the bank above the street, with a tucked-under garage and a big deck over it. Virgil pulled into the short driveway, climbed the stairs to the front door, and knocked. Green peeked out through a corner of the drape-covered picture window next to the porch, and Virgil twiddled his fingers at her. The door opened a moment later, and she said, "Officer?" The question mark in her tone indicating she'd forgotten his name. "Virgil Flowers," Virgil said. "We've had an event that I'd like to get your reaction to." She pushed open the screen door. "Come in. What happened?" The door gave onto the living room, which was filled with beige furniture and two side-by-side bookcases filled with text. An archway to the right led to a generous kitchen with a table and 4 chairs. Virgil went left, perched on a couch, and she sat on a chair facing him. "You told me that Terry Foster might have a predilection, or at least a familiarity with violence, since he was in combat in the Army. Somebody attacked him the night before last outside his house and hurt him bad." "Oh my God, is he? I mean," her reaction seemed genuinely spontaneous. She hadn't known about Foster. "He's not going to die, but his arms are broken and he's sustained some head injuries," Virgil said. "The question is this related to the Quill murder? I need to talk to you about that." "Why would it be?" she asked, frowning. "Wouldn't it more likely be a robbery, a mugging?" "There are some unusual aspects to it," he explained about the ambush, about how the attacker apparently lay in waiting for Foster. "Most muggers want your money and don't want to kill anybody because then it becomes a big deal. Muggings are usually crimes of opportunity, a random meeting on the street. This guy never demanded anything. He hid, he waited, he attacked." "What would I know about that?" Don't take this the wrong way," Virgil said. "But are you currently involved in a personal relationship?" She flushed, and a spark of anger flashed in her eyes. What? How would that?" "Foster is about your age, and he finds you attractive. He told me so. I was wondering if there was somebody else in your life who'd know about Foster's feelings, who would try to discourage him." "Death would be discouraging," Green said, maybe with a hint of humor in her voice. She went serious again. "No, I don't have a personal relationship with anyone at the moment. Terry is not unattractive, but there are some barriers when it comes to relationships between professor and students. The university doesn't forbid them, but it does encourage them. If a relationship becomes a problem, it's the professor who loses, always. He's not a kid. That does make a difference. A 45-year-old male art professor having an affair with an 18-year-old freshman is in deep trouble. And if he doesn't already have tenure, he won't get it. A 34-year-old female cultural science professor sleeping with a 34-year-old Army combat veteran won't attract so much attention because the power differentials in the two situations are quite distinct, Green said. What attention it did attract, though, wouldn't be good, especially for the professor. This is all theoretical, of course. I have no physical relationship with Terry and never have had. Might somebody think you do? She shook her head. If somebody does, it's a fantasy. I had a pleasant relationship with a nice man, a realtor, that ended 2 years ago. He wanted a comfortable home, 2 or 3 kids, and a couple of dogs, a supportive wife to make sure the dishwasher didn't overheat. That wasn't me. We both eventually recognized that and we broke up. I haven't been on a date since then. Too busy. To say nothing of the whole male privilege thing, which I'm pretty tired of. You know, the little woman to bring his slippers and pipe after a hard day slaving over the listings. I thought it was the dog that brought the slippers and the pipe, Virgil said. The job descriptions are similar, she said. Virgil peered at her and said, Huh? What? He slapped his thigh, stood up. That doesn't get me anywhere. I was hoping you had a jealous boyfriend with a collection of baseball bats. That'll be simple. Now I have to go back to wondering if there's a connection to the Quill murder or if it was just a mugging gone wrong. I don't see how it could be connected to Quill. As far as I know, Terry had nothing to do with him, Green said. That's what Terry told me. But suppose somebody from cultural science did kill Quill because he was obsessed with the idea of protecting you, and maybe had reasons to think that Terry could figure that out. That sounds like a TV cop show, Green said. Yeah, Virgil pushed hair out of his eyes. That's always a bad sign. Whatever it is, it's never like TV. And that's the end of chapter 9. There was some kind of connections with this chapter, because how did 2 different people talk about the same thing that they weren't in the same room when the discussion happened? It was about can't remember what it's about now, but I said it earlier. And there was somebody who had said that in other chapters that they would protect Professor Green by any means necessary. Yep, I'm still a little confused. I'm getting absolutely nothing. And I really wish they stopped with this innuendos and stuff like that of sex and describing women and all this other crap. But I don't think it's going to stop because it's a male author. But anyway, there was one word that I don't know if I pronounced right, and I don't know the definition. So stay tuned for the definition video. Welcome back to the definition video. The word that I couldn't pronounce is spelled ARBORVITAE. And this is how it is pronounced.
Arborvitae.
Arborvitae. One more time.
Arborvitae.
Arborvitae. I think I'm saying it right. It's a noun, a North American or Eastern Asian evergreen tree of the cypress family. One more time.
Arborvitae.
Arborvitae. I think I'm saying it right. Okay, so here we go. 2 tall, aging
Arborvitae.
stood on either side of the access door, a good spot to hide if you were planning to ambush whoever parked on the graveled spot. It makes sense. Okay, so that's the end of the definition video. I shall see you in the next chapter. Bye for now.